sat at the kitchen table with Mina. Her mother was above us, cutting up lettuce and tomatoes and bread. The table was spread with paper and paints. Mina had been painting all afternoon. There were little streaks of paint on her face. Her fingers were bright with daubs of colour. There was a large drawing of Skellig standing erect with his wings high above his shoulders. He gazed out at us, smiling. "What if she sees?" I whispered. "It could be anyone," said Mina, "or anything." Her mother turned towards us. "Good, isn't it, Michael?" she said. I nodded. The kind of thing William Blake saw. He said we were surrounded by angels and spirits. We must just open our eyes a little wider, look a little harder. She pulled a book from a shelf, showed me Blake's pictures of the winged beings he saw in his little home in London. "Maybe we could all see such beings if only we knew how to," she said. She touched my cheek. "But it's enough for me to have you two angels at my table." She stared hard at us, making her eyes wide and unblinking. "Yes," she smiled. "Isn't it amazing? I see you clearly, two angels at my table." I thought of the baby. I wondered what she would see with her innocent eyes. I wondered what she would see if she were near to death. I turned my mind away from her. I pulled a sheet of paper towards me. I found myself drawing Coot, giving him twisted arms and legs and bright red hair. I drew hair sprouting from his back, his chest, his legs. "That's your friend," said Mina. "A proper little demon." I looked at her, looked just past her, wanting to see her ghostly wings again. Her mother started singing. "I went back to him today," Mina whispered. I drew horns growing from Coot's skull. "I came for you first," she said. "Your dad said you'd gone to school." "Shouldn't I be working?" he asked. "Shouldn't I be at my lessons?" She leaned over and drew a skinny black tongue protruding from Coot's mouth. "Skellig said, 'Where's Michael?'" whispered Mina. "At school," I said. "School?" he said. "He abandoned me for school?" I said you hadn't abandoned him. I said you loved him. "I do," I whispered. "I said how terrified you were that the baby might die." "She won't," I said. "She mustn't." "He says you must keep coming to see him." She chewed her lip, leaned closer. "He says he's going away soon, Michael." "Going away?" I said. "Yes. Where to?" She shook her head. "He wouldn't say. When?" "Soon." My hands were trembling. I grabbed some more paper. I drew Skellig flapping across a pale sky. Her mother leaned over us, began clearing a space to put down our plates. "Come on," she said. "Bunk up. Food's ready. That's a lovely picture, Michael." We waited at the table as the light faded and Dad didn't come. I kept going to the front room, looking out into the street, seeing nothing. Mina's mother kept comforting me. "Don't worry, Michael. He'll come soon. Don't worry, Michael. I'm sure everything's all right." We drew and drew. I drew my family gathered around the baby. I drew Mina with her pale face, her dark eyes, the black fringe of her hair cut dead straight across her brow. I drew Skellig lying dry and dusty and useless on the garage floor. Then I drew him standing proudly by the arched window with the owls flying around him. I stared at the changed Skellig. How had this happened to him? Was it just Chinese food and cod liver oil and aspirin and brown ale and dead things left by owls? I drew Ernie Myers in striped pyjamas looking out into the wilderness. I felt how the more I drew, the more my hand and arm became free. I saw how what happened on the page looked more and more like what I saw or what I thought of in my head. I felt how by drawing my mind became concentrated, even while one part of it was still thought about and worried about the baby. I drew the baby time and time again, sometimes focusing on her wide, bold eyes, sometimes on her tiny hands, sometimes on the way her whole body arched when she rested on your knee. I drew the world as a baby might see it, the long hospital ward filled with lumbering adults, the networks of wires and tubes and bleeping instruments filling the foreground, the faces of nurses smiling down. I drew the world twisted into weird shapes by the curved glass case that covered her. In the end, I drew Skellig at the door to the ward. I felt the burst of excitement she would feel to see this, the quickening of her heart, the flickering of her life. Mina looked at my drawings. one after the other. She made a pile of them before her. She gripped my hand. "You couldn't have done these before," she said. "You're getting braver and bolder." I shrugged. "You get better at playing football by playing football," I said. "You get better at drawing by drawing." We waited and waited. The light fell. The blackbirds sang in the trees and hedges outside. Mina's mother switched the lamp on. The phone rang, but it wasn't Dad. Mina's mother gave us little squares of chocolate that I allowed to melt slowly and gently on my tongue. She kept singing songs from time to time. Some of them were songs of Blake's, some were ancient folk songs. Mina joined in sometimes with her bold, high voice. Mina smiled at my silence. "Soon we'll have you singing too," she said. The day darkened and darkened. "I want to show you something," said Mina. She filled a little bowl with warm water and put it on the table. She reached up onto the shelf and took down a ball of skin and bone and fur, like the one she'd taken from the garage floor. She dropped it into the warm water. She rubbed it with her fingers. It separated into fragments of dark fur and ripped skin. She pulled out tiny bones. There was the skull of a tiny animal. Her mother watched and smiled. "Another owl pellet," she said. "Yes," said Mina. She looked at me. "Owls eat their victims whole, Michael," she said. "They digest the flesh, then they regurgitate the parts that can't be digested. Skin and bone and fur. You can see what the owl has been eating by inspecting the pellet. This owl, like most owls, has eaten small creatures like mice or voles." Her mother turned away, worked at the sink. "This is the pellet I brought out from the garage," she whispered. "There were dozens of them in there, Michael. It came from Skellig," I whispered. She nodded. "What does it mean?" She shook her head. "What is he?" She shook her head. There was nothing more I could say. "Extraordinary," she hissed. She started singing again. When I looked out into the street, I saw lights and windows, the treetops etched black against the mauve sky. I looked up and saw the last birds heading for their nests. Then the phone went again, and this time it was Dad. Mina's mother held the handset out to me. I couldn't go to it. She smiled. "Come on," she said, "come on." Dad said everything was fine. The baby was sleeping. He'd seen the doctors. He was staying for a little while longer with Mum. "Is the baby okay?" I said. "What are they going to do?" "They'll operate tomorrow," he said. "What are they going to do?" No answer. "Dad, what are they going to do?" I heard the sighing, the fear in his voice. "They're operating on her heart, Michael." He said some more, but I couldn't hear it. Something about being with me soon, about how everything would be fine, about how Mum sent me her love. I dropped the phone. "They're operating on her heart," I whispered. I went out into the front garden with Mina. We sat on the front wall waiting for Dad's car turning into the street. The door was open behind us, letting a wedge of light out into the dark. Whisper came, slinking through the shadows below the wall. He sat below us, curled against our feet. "What does it mean?" I said. "If Skellig eats living things and makes pellets like the owls?" She shrugged. "We can't know," she said. "What is he?" I said. "We can't know. Sometimes we just have to accept there are things we can't know. Why is your sister ill? Why did my father die?" She held my hand. "Sometimes we think we should be able to know everything, but we can't. We have to allow ourselves to see what there is to see, and we have to imagine." We talked about the fledglings in the nest above us. We tried together to hear their breathing. We wondered what blackbird babies dreamed about. "Sometimes they'll be very scared," said Mina. "They'll dream about cats climbing towards them. They'll dream about dangerous crows with ugly beaks. They'll dream about vicious children plundering the nest. They'll dream of death all around them. There'll be happy dreams as well. Dreams of life. They'll dream of flying like their parents do. They'll dream of finding their own tree one day, building their own nest, having their own chicks." I held my hand to my heart. What would I feel when they opened the baby's fragile chest, when they cut into her tiny heart? Mina's fingers were cold and dry and small. I felt the tiny pulse of blood in them. I felt how my own hand trembled very quickly, very gently. "We're still like chicks," she said. "Happy half the time, half the time dead scared. I closed my eyes and tried to discover where the happy half was hiding. I felt the tears trickling through my tightly closed eyelids. I felt Whisper's claws tugging at my jeans. I wanted to be all alone in an attic like Skellig, with just the owls and the moonlight and an oblivious heart. "You're so brave," said Mina.
And then Dad's car came with its blaring engine and its glaring lights, and the fear just increased and increased and increased. An endless night, in and out of dreams, in and out of sleep. Dad snoring and snuffling in the room next door. No moon in the sky, endless darkness. The clock at my bedside was surely stuck. All it showed were the dead hours. 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. Endless minutes between them, no hooting of owls, no calling from Skellig or Mina. Like the whole world was stuck, all of time was stuck. Then I must have slept properly at last, and I woke to daylight with stinging eyes and sunken heart.
And then we fought, my dad and I, while we crunched burnt toast and swigged tepid tea. "No," I yelled. "I won't go to school. Why should I? Not today." "You'll do as you're bloody told. You'll do what's best for your mum and the baby. You just want me out of the way so you don't have to think about me and don't have to worry about me and you can just think about the bloody baby." "Don't say bloody. It is bloody. It's bloody, 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 and it isn't fair." Dad kicked the leg of the table and the milk bottle toppled over on the table and a jar of jam crashed to the floor. "See," he yelled, "see the state you get me in?" He raised his fist like he wanted to smash something, anything, the table, me. "Go to bloody school," he yelled. "Get out my bloody sight." Then he just reached across and grabbed me to him. "I love you," he whispered. "I love you." And we cried and cried. "You could come with me," he said, "but there'd be nothing you could do. We just have to wait and pray and believe that everything will be all right." Moments later, Mina came knocking at the door. She had Whisper in her arms. "You've got to come and help me," she said. Dad nodded. "I'll come for you this afternoon," he said, "when the operation's over. Go with Mina." She took me to her garden. She gripped Whisper tight. On the rooftop, the blackbird started yelling its alarm call. "Bad boy," she said to the cat, and she went to the open front door, threw him in, pushed it shut behind him. "The fledglings are out," she said. "Stay dead still and quiet. Watch out for cats." We sat on the front step and didn't move.
"Under the hedge," she said, "and under the rose tree by the wall." I started to ask what I was looking for, but then I saw the first of them, little brown feathered ball with its beak gaping in the darkness beneath the hedge. "This is how they start their life outside the nest," she said. "They can't fly. Their parents still have to feed them, but they're nearly all alone. All they can do is walk and hide in the shadows and wait for their food." The parents came closer, the brown mother to the lowest branch of the tree, the jet black father to the top of the hedge. Worms dangled from their beaks. They called softly to each other, and the fledglings with little clicks and coughs.
"First day out," whispered Mina. "Think Whisper's had at least one of them already." The parents waited, wary of us. Then at last they dropped into the garden. A fledgling tottered out from beneath the rosebush, let its mother drop the worms into its beak, tottered back again. The father fed the one beneath the hedge. The parents flew away again. "They'll be doing this all day," said Mina, "flying and feeding all the way till dusk. And the same thing tomorrow and tomorrow till the chicks can fly." We stayed watching. "Cats'll get 'em," she said, "or crows or stupid dogs." Dad came out of our house. He came into Mina's garden. Mina pressed a finger to her lips and widened her eyes in warning. He tiptoed to us. "The fledglings are out of the nest," she whispered. She showed him where to look. "Yes," he whispered. "Yes, yes." He crouched beside us, dead still. "Aren't they lovely?" he said. He cupped my cheek in his hand and we looked deep into each other's eyes. Then he had to go. "You just keep believing," he said, "and everything will be fine." He went to the car and drove from the street as quietly as he could. Mina and I watched and waited as the brown mother and the jet black father flew in and out of the garden, feeding their young. Mid-morning, Mina's mother brought cups of tea for us. She sat beside us on the step. She talked about the fledglings, the flowers that were bursting into bloom, the air that every day became warmer, the sun that every day was a little higher and a little warmer. She talked about the way spring made the world burst into life after months of apparent death. She told us about the goddess called Persephone, who was forced to spend half a year in the darkness deep underground. Winter happened when she was trapped inside the earth. The days shrank, they became cold and short and dark. Living things hid themselves away. Spring came when she was released and made her slow way up to the world again. The world became brighter and bolder in order to welcome her back. It began to be filled with warmth and light. The animals dared to wake, they dared to have their young. Plants dared to send out buds and shoots. Life dared to come back. An old myth, I said. Yes, she said, but maybe it's a myth that's nearly true. Look around you, Michael. Fledglings and blooms and bright sunshine. Maybe what we see around us is the whole world welcoming Persephone home. She rested her hand on my arm. They can do marvellous things, Michael. Maybe you'll soon be welcoming your own Persephone home. We thought of Persephone for a while in silence. I imagined her struggling her way towards us. She squeezed through black tunnels. She took wrong turnings, banged her head against the rocks. Sometimes she gave up in despair and she just lay weeping in the pitch darkness. But she struggled on. She waded through icy underground streams. She fought through bedrock and clay and iron ore and coal, through fossils of ancient creatures, the skeletons of dinosaurs, the buried remains of ancient cities. She burrowed past the tangled roots of great trees. She was torn and bleeding, but she kept telling herself to move onward and upward. She told herself that soon she'd see the light of the sun again and feel the warmth of the world again. Then Mina's mother broke into my thoughts. "I'll watch the birds," she said. "Why don't you both go and wander for a while?" Amina took my hand and led me away. It was like walking in a dream. The houses tilted and swayed. The sun glared over the rooftops. Birds were ragged and black against the astonishing sky. The roadway glistened, a deep black pond. Invisible traffic roared and squealed. She held my arm. "Are you all right, Michael?" she kept asking. "Are you sure you're all right?"
We made our way towards the danger door. She led me through the gate, through the long garden, through the door into the dark and dusty interior. We went up in silence. She held my arm like I was an old man or an invalid. On the final landing, she told me, "He'll be waiting for us, Michael. He'll be so pleased to see you again." She turned the handle. We went in. Sunlight poured through the arched window. We stood there staring. He wasn't there.
Mina rang back down through the house. I heard her feet on the bare boards, doors swinging open. I heard her calling for him, "Skellig, Skellig, Skellig." I heard her coming slowly back up to me. Her face was paler than ever. There were tears shining in her eyes. "He isn't here," she whispered. "He just isn't here at all." We went to the window and gazed into the empty sky above the city. I found myself falling forward. I gripped the windowsill tight. I touched my heart. "Oh, Mina," I said. "What is it?" "My heart stopped. Feel my heart. There's nothing there." She caught her breath. She touched my chest. She called my name. And then there was just blackness.